On episode 134 of the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, I bring in Physna CEO, co-founder, and 30 under 30 recipient, Paul Powers. And he's going to be talking all about how you can attract great talent to get your members and keep them here. How you can inspire your team to go through extreme adversity, folks. He's going to tell you a super personal story all about his. And most importantly, how you can keep people in line with the vision and go for gold. That's right. Welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. Are you ready for it? Let's do it.
Welcome to this episode of Moving Forward Leadership. Stick around and learn how to achieve, excel, and become a leader that people willingly follow. Lead, don't boss. And now, here's the host of our show, Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy.
Welcome one, welcome all to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and welcome to the podcast where we cover the three domains of leadership, and that is leading yourself so that you can be the best leader that you want to be, leading your team so that you can achieve the high-performing team status that we all strive to have within our organizations, and then finally, leading your organization so you can increase that organizational output and achieve great things. And today, we couple world-class guests like Paul Powers, 30 under 30 recipient with my 20 years of military experience to bring you this. And hey, folks, as my good friend Chris Williams says, if this works for you, go tell your friends. And be sure to tell them to check out movingforwardleadership.com for everything around this ecosystem. And thanks for coming out. And today we're going to be talking about leading through growth, disaster, and success. And it is a roller coaster. Woo! Paul does not stop bringing out the bombs in this episode. From everything, including a huge personal setback. I won't go into the details. I'm not going to ruin it for you. But yeah, a huge personal setback that he as a leader had to get through. He had to rally his team and get them moving after this big thing that happened to them. So you're definitely going to want to listen to this. If this is your first time hearing about Paul Powers, no worries. You know what? Last year, just in 2019, he was recognized by Forbes Magazine as one of the brightest young entrepreneurs in the United States and won a slot on the 30 under 30. He's been featured in publications around the world, including Forbes, Fortune, various news programs such as Dobbs of Fox Business and dozens others. He's been on the TED Talk. He's been at various summits and tech conferences such as PLMx, Startup Grind, Startup of the Year at SXSW, and he's the co-founder of Physna, which is a industry-leading software to bridge the gap between software and the physical world by basically becoming, as they like to say, the Google of 3D modeling and 3D data. It is insane what he has been doing. And in this episode, he holds no punches. It is amazing. And the coolest thing about Paul is his humility. Like, you don't realize you're talking to this super successful, super rising star, 30 under 30 recipient. You think you're just talking to another person. So it's a fantastic interview. And you know what? Speaking of which, why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview with Paul Powers talking all about leading through growth, disaster, and success. Paul, man, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So, sorry to say, but you're not the first 30 under 30 recipient to be on the show. But you're the most recent, obviously. I had Tance Hughes on the show once. I don't know if you know Tance, but he's another 30 under 30 member. But he's back in episode something like 30, and I'm up to episode 134 now. So it's been a while.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the first thing I like to do, though, is get the guest, give us a little bit of background about yourself, who you are, where you grew up, how you got to be who you are today, kind of thing. And then we'll dive in from there.
Sure. So I grew up on the west side of Cincinnati back when, still not the best part of it's not the best neighborhood in the world, but it was a little bit better back then, but it's pretty bad right now. I went to a public school when I was a little kid, like doing kindergarten, or first grade, and it was pretty rough. It was a rough neighborhood. So just because of how rough the school was, my parents ended up taking me out and decided to do homeschooling. And then not too long after that, my dad was in a car crash. He survived, but he had like a lot of spinal injuries and stuff. Long story short, my mom had to go back to work. My dad's laid up, so it became more or less a matter of teaching myself things. And it wasn't that hard because you just took an exam every year, and then that let the government know that you're learning enough, I guess. So, and that I think was a real defining moment for me because I was always very, I guess you could call it nerdy. I was pretty self-driven in academia, I guess, and always had these higher ambitions of what I wanted to accomplish in life. I think one thing that helped me was if you're homeschooled, it's not like I was a social outcast or anything. I still had hobbies, but you're not sitting next to other people every day, and you don't have these scholastic peers that you're evaluating yourself against. So for me, people I would measure myself against would be people that I would read about, people who have accomplished great things like Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, people like that who had really changed history in these amazing ways. And that really motivated me to think big and to do big things. So that I think was a real defining moment, and also just learning to be self-sufficient and autonomous. That was the best lesson I got out of everything. Nice thing about being homeschooled, especially if you're basically learning on your own, is that you do get the opportunity to dive deeper into what you're interested in. And maybe, unfortunately, you get to ignore what you're not interested in. So for the longest time, I didn't read any English literature. You could cite quotes from books that I have no idea what you're talking about. American history is something I, recently tried to catch up on because people were making fun of me for not knowing who some pretty key figures were. But I did get to go pretty deep into the sciences. So by the time I was 12, I got to go to, I was taking college chemistry, which was cool. I got to go to Harvard at 16. I focused on astrophysics and astronomy there. I was really big into quantum physics and quantum mechanics. I think that was like the coolest thing in the world. So I was very left-brained, I guess you could say. Right? I was very interested in those fields. And my big goal was, hey, I want to become like those people that I read about. I want to become like an Einstein or a Newton or whatever, or I want to leave behind some kind of big footprint that helps humanity. And so in the future, some little kid will be reading about me doing something great, right? I thought it's the least I can do because my life is, better than lives were in the medieval times because of science and technology. And it'd be a shame if I didn't contribute to that, is the way I thought about it. I went to, like I said, I got to go to college pretty early, but I was pretty quickly disillusioned with it because I realized that that's not really the path anymore. Not saying that science isn't a good path, but you can't. These days, it's a little bit harder. It feels just to go into some abstract field of science and change the world that way, or to really understand technology and change things as I guess, almost like a foot soldier. You have to really have a company behind you. And I realized that you need to raise money or to get grants for whatever you want to study. And most of the time you have no say over really how that goes. And I thought, okay, if I really want to change things or dive deep into an area that I think is really cool, the best way to do that would be an entrepreneur. And I kind of had that spirit anyway. When I was 16, I had already started a company. We started off just me tutoring people, but then pretty quickly I realized, hey, I don't know everything. People would call and ask if I could tutor Spanish, and no, because I don't speak Spanish. So I would find people who did, and then I created a company out of that. That company morphed into a more tech-based company over time. But I'd already started a company, and I thought maybe this is the way that I can go. It was my tutoring company was becoming more tech-driven. I thought maybe there's more I can do in the tech space. So I decided I was a very scholastic kid. So I thought if I want to, and I don't want to not go to college. I don't want to be just start as an entrepreneur this early. But I thought, maybe I'll study something different. And at that time, I had an opportunity to go do an exchange year. So I went to Switzerland and learned German, or at least Swiss German, and learned it pretty quickly because I was, a little bit young. I was pretty young at the time, 16. So it was, back then I could pick up a language pretty quickly. Right now, forget it. If I try to learn a language at this point, it'd be much harder. But I picked it up pretty quickly, and so I was able to I applied and got over to the University of Heidelberg over there, which is like their top. The school was founded in like 1386, like the oldest university. It's like it's really cool. It's like it's very prestigious, and I decided I would do law. I thought I could do law or business if I'm going to go in business. And I thought, well, law would be different, and German law school was every bit as much fun as it sounds. So it's hard. And I knew the whole time I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I couldn't. There's something in me that just wouldn't let me not get a degree. So I had to get one. And I thought, if I'm going to get a degree, I might as well get the most difficult, useless degree in the world. So in German law is pretty much what that is. And anyway, studied German law, came out of it, and was running companies the whole time. One idea that I had while my focus was obviously on intellectual property. If you're scientifically minded or scientific geeky kind of person and you go into law, then there's only really one place for you, and that's going to be patent law, right? So, so I came out I was doing IP law, and I noticed that we could never find anything three-dimensional, right? So if someone stole your logo or your music video or whatever, it plagiarized your text, it's super easy to find. We had algorithms that found everything. But the moment somebody steals a physical good, they copy your patent, if you will, or they design something that's similar to what you've designed, we couldn't really catch that. And but these things that are being designed, they're out there in 3D in the CAD space, but we weren't able to figure out those correlations. So I thought it would be cool to, create an algorithm that would find that. I looked online and I found there was some stuff that was called geometric search, technology, and thought, cool. So I packed my bags, moved back to the US, started up this company, found after trying pretty much everything that was in the market that none of the things that were advertised as such could actually do that, which was annoying. And my co-founder at the time and I went on a retreat. We went down to the Caribbean, actually, because my girlfriend's family has a place down there, and it was around Christmas. So it was a great time to just kind of take a week off, and we just sat with a whiteboard we bought from Kmart every night and just tried to figure out, how else can we solve this problem? How can we figure out how 3D models relate? And bringing it full circle was kind of cool because it was actually some principles that I had vaguely remembered from astrophysics that turned out to be some of the basis for what we're doing, what we now call Physna, short for physical DNA. And so skipping a lot here, but after starting up that company and raising some money, after a while we were able to put together a set of algorithms that would allow us to take three-dimensional data from any source and find out how all that data is related to any other 3D data, no matter what source it's from, and not just relationships like this is similar to that, but this is inside of that, or these things have these similarities in this one field or this one area, or this is what overlaps, I guess, between these parts, but not like, I'm not talking about like an overlay. I really mean more like almost more like DNA. That's why we use the analogy of physical DNA. It allowed us to figure out, what parts were derived from what parts do you need to add together to build an assembly, even if you have no idea what parts go into it. How can you figure out what parts would fulfill that and have the right characteristics? Are there differences between models that you can't see in a viewer? It was really interesting, and all for IP. And we went to it's called IMTS. It's like a trade show that happens every couple of years in Chicago. This is back before COVID, when you can actually go to meet people in person. So we did that up in Chicago, and I didn't have enough money at that point to invest in a booth or anything. So we just paid out of pocket for these tickets, which are like $1,000 a person just to get into this place. And then just walked around and talked to some different vendors there. And I was trying to sell them on this idea of maybe we get intellectual property protection. But what was interesting was, I'd sold technology before. This was unusual. They were asking us like, okay, well, how does that work exactly? And how do you figure out how these models relate? And within a month of that, we had 20 different companies. Most of them are pretty big, like Fortune 500 companies and some government agencies, calling us up with totally different use cases. Everything from identifying tumors at an earlier stage with 3D machine learning than you can do with two-dimensional machine learning, to TSA for scanning of items when they come into the airport, to engineering productivity, to identifying changes that happen in an airplane after a mission in the Air Force, for instance. And we realized we couldn't do everything, but it was fascinating to hear that there were this many use cases. And we realized that actually the software could solve a lot of them. We couldn't do all that, so we decided to focus on one area. We did, which was the engineering efficiency side, and it's kind of grown from there to cover a few more use cases as well. But I've talked pretty long now, so I'm going to stop. That's kind of my path here.
That's probably the longest intro in the history of my podcast, but you know what? There's so much gold in there. Like, wow. Just from so many lessons from, just being relentless to not succumbing to your circumstances, but finding the opportunities in them. Just like we were talking before we hit record, right? There's opportunity in everything. Mm-hmm. And just so much great in there. I was like, wow. And a few chuckles here and there. So a lot of success, a lot of determination, and a lot of drive on your part, which obviously has led to your success of being named on the 30 under 30 list. So here you are now. It's you and your co-founder. You guys are getting Physna ready. Physna, I assume, is the proper pronunciation.
Yes, yeah.
You're really starting to get it to go bigger than what you expected at this point. Right. And at what point did you start expanding your team? And then how did you bring them in, and kind of start developing that culture within the company? Because at this point, it was just you two. So how did you establish that culture? How did you bring them in? How did you establish your culture to establish success going forward?
Probably going to prove yet again that brevity is not my strong suit, but I'll try. Unfortunately, my co-founder, Glenn Warner, he passed away last year, kind of unexpectedly in late October of 2019. So,
shit, my condolences. That sucks.
Yeah, it does. It was pretty awful. Or it is awful, but it was a really hard thing to go through. So I can't say that. So he's not here with us physically, obviously, anymore, but. When we started the company, it was really just a matter of finding people who we could afford, frankly. Back then, it was all coming out of pocket. Very little money came from investors, and these were very much the friends and family type investors at the beginning. After we had something that we could demonstrate and prove that the theory was something, then we could raise a little bit of money. But we took it in a lot of small steps. I went from having zero debt at all because German university was free and I was always working, to coming back to the U.S., leaving that pretty well paying job, to then being $300,000 in debt, so I could start this company up. And then, so I spent a lot of money getting this thing off the ground. So we hired the people we could afford, and they're good. We had our principals on who we hired. They were people who got the point, were excited about it, and I don't mean that in a demeaning way. I just meant that we really had to just do what we had to do at the very, very beginning. Over time, we got more money. We were able to be much more picky about it. But the real big change happened, last year when we raised our Series A. We were able to go from this technology that we'd put together off of very, very little investment into a much more production level environment, where we had enough money to hire a large enough team to build out the technology so where it can fulfill the needs of some of our customers. Most of our customers are really big. They're like Fortune 500 companies, or government agencies. We've got Physna's actually got the largest 3D database in the entire Department of Defense. We do a lot of work with, and there are all kinds of companies. There are companies in aerospace, automotive, but also like clothing companies and stuff. It's really random what these companies are. So as far as like right now, so after that Series A, unfortunately, Glenn passed away not long after that. And the hardest thing I ever had to do was bridging that time between Glenn passing away and, well, I almost want to say now, but really certainly between then and when I hired the next CTO, which was about 6 months. So that 6-month period was awful because it was stressful, but it was also emotionally painful. It was very hard keeping the team together, keeping everyone motivated, because when he passed away, we realized that, there was some knowledge that he passed away with that we weren't able to, you can't just replace. So somebody who's been working with you for a couple of years on this technology. So I knew enough about it to keep the things moving. I knew, but that was rough. Finding the new CTO was where I think I can answer your question best, because that was the time when, and I don't mean that other hires don't matter or that we don't have a really rigorous process to hire people. We do, for sure. And we had that for a long time. But hiring a CTO, someone who almost you can't really replace a person, obviously, but someone who has to fill that role of a CTO and almost like a co-founder in a sense. That's a really hard thing to do, especially when you're stressed out and you're busier than ever before. Finding somebody to take on that role at the same time is extremely tough. So I interviewed many, many, many people, certainly over 100 for sure. And that was after they were screened. I used a recruiter. So we were extremely picky. And I found a really good one. I'm really happy with him. So his name's Dennis DeMeyer, and he's from Google. He was a CTO within Google Cloud. It's the highest level technical executive to ever leave Google, actually. And I flew out to Mountain View, met him out there, talked to him for 6 hours. And he, not too long after that, got in a plane, left Google, and came over to be CTO here at Physna. We also were able to bring on Jason Warner, who's the CTO of GitHub, to be on our board and work with us part-time as well. And so working with Dennis, and Jason, we worked really hard to get a lot of extra senior development talent onto the team. We've been adding to our sales team and kind of scaling things out as well. But the way that you attract great talent is, you don't want to find someone who's looking for a job. You want to find someone who's looking for a mission. And that's why I had to interview over 100 people to fill that role. They had to get why, and they had to be someone that you can work with, and they had to be someone that could become passionate about an idea that they heard, which is tough, because it's easy to become passionate about your own idea. Finding someone who can be passionate about something else is, I can be passionate about something else too in theory, but it takes quite a lot to get someone to that level of passion. So you have to spend a lot of time with them. And that's what I did. And that's, so finding Dennis was great because he had the work ethic, he had the vision, he understood exactly what the point of everything was, what the bigger picture was. And was excited to do that, and was obviously willing to take a huge pay cut and a huge gamble to leave one of the best paying and most prestigious jobs in tech and come over to, at the time, a little startup in Cincinnati.
Wow. Yeah, that's an incredible story. And it's horrible when you lose someone. And I'll give you a little personal example for me. So by day, I'm a senior Canadian Army officer. So 2009, 2010, I deployed to Kandahar, Afghanistan, part of a small unit. We were actually embedded directly into Afghan National Army units, mentoring liaison for these people. And my particular team were predominantly based out of Kandahar Airfield. So major base, relatively secure, not so secure in terms of Canada or US, but secure for Afghanistan at the time. And so one of the things we used to do to blow off steam was play ball hockey. And my unit was lucky enough to have 2 teams. So anyway, long story short, while I was away for a little bit and I came back, I found out actually one of my team members had got hit on a operation, managed to get flown back home to Canada, but unfortunately succumbed to his injuries, and we lost him. So
oh man,
we what we ended up doing to rally my ball hockey team, we ended up writing his nickname on our shirts that we would play with. So his name was Corporal Darren Fitzpatrick, and we all wrote down Fitzy on our shirts, and we just kind of rallied around that in his memory and going after it. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And it's tough. You don't replace people, and
right.
Unfortunately, people go away with corporate knowledge, and especially in your case, but you can rally around it, right? And you can bring people in, and you can get their culture, and you can get your culture going and stuff like that. But as soon as one person changes, the dynamics change, right?
For sure. And you bring up a good point, and I'll add to that. Like, people will rally around it if you've got good people. And what was really touching for me at the time, I had somebody tell me very quickly after Glenn passed away, they warned me, like, look, expect that you'll lose about a third of your team to attrition because of this, because they're going to be afraid of what happens to the company. You've got a co-founder that's passed away. They're going to think that they don't know what that means. I'm not going to say it's never happened. I'm sure it has, but it's not something you hear about happening very often in startups, and a lot of people are going to freak out. And so expect to lose a lot of people, certainly a third. So I was ready for that, and but it didn't happen. Actually, nobody left, and everybody started working extra hard, and we really rallied around it. We had a memorial for him, and we did everything we could, and we used that as a rallying call. And I think that's what he would have wanted, and I think he would have been very proud to see how the team really rallied around that, how they worked extra hard. They, they're a great group of people, and I'm really honored to work with them. And that's how I know that I think we built the right kind of culture and hired the right people at Physna. Wow,
there's nothing but good there for sure. Awesome. So on that note, you took away one of my biggest questions, which is you talk about your greatest challenge, and obviously that's it right there, right? I can't imagine having to go through a greater challenge than losing a co-founder. But let's talk about some of your successes that you have with your team and your organization. So, what are some of the things that pop out when I say, tell me about your team, your people? What are some of the great things about them that pop out, and how do they inspire you on a daily basis?
I get inspired by them all the time because they really take a lot of ownership in the product, and this is something that you have to really, it's not, culture doesn't just happen. You have to nurture it. But what I'm really happy about with the team is that we've got them now to a point where they really take a lot of ownership over the product and the success of our company, that they are very emotionally invested in making sure that every customer is happy and making sure that things work the way that they're supposed to, and helping each other out with when they're struggling with something. And, it's not uncommon at all to see people working around the clock, very literally, even being in the same time zone. You'll see people working at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. So, I mean, it's almost like they're playing, like it's, what's what I'm looking for? Like they're handing off the torch essentially from one person to the next. They're working literally around the clock sometimes to get things done. And it's not because there's no one standing over them with a whip or anything saying you have to get this done by this time or you're fired. No one's doing that, but they know how important it is that we get that we do we get things done at a certain time. And it's hard because we're a small company. There was an article that just came out today highlighting we just had a product launch today called Thangs. Thangs it's spelled exactly how it sounds, exactly as stupid as hillbilly as it sounds. Thangs is THANGS. If you go to thangs.com, that's the product, right? So it's the world's first public geometric search engine. So you can upload, if you have a design for something, let's say you design a mechanical watch, you can upload that into Thangs, and it'll tell you everything it found that's similar to that, but also all the components it found that you need to build that watch, and it'll give you and it'll show you how they fit into that watch, but also where you need to go to get all those parts and buy them. That's something that was never possible before. But that came out just today. That was an insanely hard thing to build because there's nothing like it in the world. There's millions of parts that are ingested to go into this, and that's built with only a fraction of our engineering team, right? So you're talking about a handful of people, like 5 or less people, building out a platform that can do something that was never possible before. Now, it's all based on business technology, but still, that's a hard thing to do. Then you've got the other part of the company, of the development team, working on the enterprise product, though the initial core product for mechanical engineers and suppliers, and just identifying parts in public and knowing how parts fit together, not redesigning the parts over from scratch, avoiding ordering duplicate components from different suppliers, making sure that you're not shutting down operations because you think that you need something that you don't from one vendor when really there's 500 and it's COVID and you can't order from them because they're shut down. So getting around those issues, you can use the enterprise product and they'll do that as well. But that's something that only has a handful of people on too. There's another technology that we're working on, which is 2D to 3D. You take a picture of something and we create we give you the corresponding CAD model for that picture. And we actually do it to manufacturing specification, like manufacturing quality. We're years ahead of the rest of the industry in all three of these areas. And, each team has just a few people. To do that, you have to have people who are really motivated and get the big picture. They can't be people who are motivated by the little things, like how long is the lunch break or whatever. We're pretty loose and those things. We're pretty liberal, I guess you could say, in how much there's a good amount of PTO. We have great healthcare for employees. We pay the best that we can, but then there's the options, and that's where people really are excited. Everybody who works at Physna is a partial owner, essentially. They all have stock options in the company, and that's part of our culture and building out the right mentality. But I'm still inspired by it because seeing people work that late, knowing that especially in the time of COVID, there's no way that I can validate whether or not or verify in most cases whether or not someone is stopping at 5, 7, 9, 10, or 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know necessarily, but they're not doing it just for me. They're doing it for the greater good of the company. And in some cases, they rarely ever do they make a big fuss out of it saying, hey, look, I was up until 3 o'clock in the morning getting this thing done. I have to find out through somebody else. And that's what I think is really exciting about the team that we have, is that they act like owners, which they are. That's great.
You're a leader. You're busy. You're busy taking care of your people. You're busy taking your organization. And if you're a small business owner and you're at the top of the food chain, you're here listening to this podcast because you want to know how to lead your people better. So you don't have time for that nitty-gritty details that revolve around marketing. Believe me, I get it. I'm with you side by side. So that's why, I've tapped into using Penji. If you look around at all my social media, banners and logos, they're all developed by Penji. Jonathan Grzybowski, co-founder of Penji, has been a great supporter of the podcast, and I'm supporting him. So if you go to penji.co, penji.co, and use the coupon code MFL15, you're going to get 15% off your monthly subscription. And that isn't just 1 month. No, that is for life. As long as you're paying into them, you're going to get that 15% off, which is huge. Check it out and see if Penji is right for you. Because you know what? I know they're right for me. Again, that is Penji, penji.co, and use the coupon code MFL15. And now, time to get back to the show. Love it. Absolutely love it. And I love the part where you talked about you don't sweat the small stuff, right? Like, who cares how long they take for their lunch?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's results, right? I had a boss once, and I referred to him as the ultimate clock watcher. He knew to the second when I showed up in the morning, and he knew to the second when I left at end of the day. And no matter what was going on, so the unit I was at, ironically, is the unit I'm back at again now, is a high readiness unit. So we're screened, we're administratively trained, high readiness trained. Like I sit literally with my bags packed, and I can receive a phone call, and within 12 hours, I'm on a plane somewhere in the world. That's how high readiness we are. That guy would watch me come into work and know exactly what time I came in, what time I left. But with that organization, when you're not training, we don't train obviously every single day. There's routine work to get done, but sometimes there's just, there's nothing to do right now. Right. And the point is that, maybe there will be something chaos. And for example, in 2015, when I was there was a massive earthquake in Nepal, and Canada sent what we call the Disaster Assistance Relief Team, which is actually headed by this organization. I may tell you, I worked some crazy hours during that 40-odd day deployment. I didn't go over there, but I worked here out of Kingston, Ontario. And the point is that if you treat your people like you said, you don't care. They're going to go to bat for you, and they're going to do those little things that inspire you and enable them to act like owners. They're going to be the ones that are staying up till 4:00 to get this proposal done for the company that you're presenting to tomorrow, because they actually care and they know you're going to treat them with respect on the other end. So that's
absolutely.
I love it. I love it. Love it. And let's talk about Dim, from your standpoint, the importance of the vision of the company, and how do you go about getting that ingrained into your team? Because I can only imagine right now it's probably even more difficult with COVID going on. Almost everybody's working at home or distributed, or barriers in place and stuff like this. So how do you go about pushing your vision for the company on your people and ensuring that they actually get it, which obviously they do, but I really would like to know how you've done that.
Well, I wouldn't call it pushing a vision, because I don't think you can. I mean, I can sit here all day and preach about what my vision is, but it'll stay that way, right? It'll stay my vision. It needs to become theirs. And the way that I go about it is, when we recruit people, we spend a lot of time talking about the mission here, like what we're trying to do. And what I always tell people is, it doesn't matter. Like before I ask them a single question about them, the way I start interviews is probably really unusual, but I think it works for me. I start them off by telling them what Physna is, like what you don't read about online. Our goal here is to bridge the gap between 2D and 3D. Digital technology is based on binary code, is 2-dimensional, and the real world is 3-dimensional. And our goal is to get technology to that next level, like trinary, if you will, where the digital world is capable of understanding reality in its natural state, in its 3-dimensional natural state, not in its interpreted knowledge-based state. In other words, right now, if I want to share with you a cup or something, I can write the word cup. I can say the word cup over Zoom right now. I could show you a picture of a cup or even a video of a cup. You don't have that cup. You just see an interpretation of it. And if I don't turn it around, you'll never see what's on the other side of it. And you don't know what it feels like. You don't know the weight of it. We need to change that. We need to overcome that if we're going to make it further as a species. And we talk about how we got here, and we talk about where we're going, the steps that we're taking to make that a reality. Our goal is to usher in a whole new era of technology at Physna. I'm happy, of course, to talk about what the software does today. I mean, today I can really simply, it saves time in engineering, so it's used by CAD designers. It saves time and it saves a lot of money in procurement, so it's used by procurement professionals. And it helps you figure out how parts relate to one another, so you know how to put things together. So it's used by people in maintenance, warehousing, and inventory. Those are the 3 biggest use cases of it today. That's not all that we're going to do, though. This technology, we're building a platform for it so that other people, what we've been able to do is prove, one, that you can create something like a trinary code or a physical DNA. We've been able to prove that you can use that to create, to solve a problem that was unsolvable before. You can give me the parts that you have laying in your garage, and I'll tell you with Physna what you can build with that, right? If you can build a turbocharger out of your lawnmower, I can tell you that, right? That's the cool thing about Physna. We can do stuff that was never possible before. We've been able to prove that people will pay for that because it solves a huge problem for them, and they get a ridiculous ROI when they use Physna. It pays for itself, like a year license will pay for itself in the first week. I mean, it's great how effective this is. But if you can do those 3 things, we're done proving. Now we have to do is we have to execute and create a new era of technology. And the goal is to make the digital world 3-dimensional and make reality and digital the same. And that's the bigger vision here. And we talk about the different use cases that has, and we talk about, and not hypothetical ones. I don't come up with use cases. I take use cases that people came to us with and said, this is a real use case. This would save lives by finding tumors earlier. This would help with modeling how drugs can better fight off different diseases by doing scenario-based 3D modeling and blah, 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 blah. There are whatever floats your boat. There are a lot of things that you can do with this technology, and I try to view it as big picture as possible. You've got one life. There are millions of companies you could work for. This company is going to be one of the hardest you can work for because it's going to be at times grueling. It's going to be very difficult. There is no roadmap. What we're building is a new category of technology. There is no roadmap for how to build this at all. None. Zero. Zilch. You can use analogies and say, well, this other company was hard and this is how they did it. That's about as far as you can go. And where you're doing it on a string, you're doing it off of a tiny budget because you're a startup. And it's, the amount of money that startups get funded with might sound like a lot to an individual, but when you consider how much we have to pay for, we're actually doing it on a shoestring budget. So you have to, I try to be very transparent and tell them, this is going to be the hardest thing you ever did in your life. But if you do it right and we do it together, this will be the biggest thing you'll do in your life, that we'll do in our lives. And when they get the big picture, the big macro picture, they can come in and they can see that in action. They can see how we're solving it day to day for these different companies, how we're solving it for the public now in the case of things, right? They can see these different things that are coming out. And they start to take a lot of ownership and they start to become involved. And it's not a trick. That's truth. The truth is that as they become more involved with the company, the more they contribute and the more excited they get, not only because we have options, but because they put their own influence and their own ideas into this technology. It's not my vision anymore. It's all of ours. We're all working on this together. I might have started the company. I might have had the original idea, and I might be the main person you would talk to for the vision, and ultimately it's my say. But I don't treat it like that. I want people to have as much ownership over this as they can, because that's how we'll get there. I can't code every line of code that's necessary for Physna. I can barely code anything, but they can. They're much better at coding than I am. My job as CEO is to go from, you start off as chief everything officer, then you become chief executive officer, but eventually what you want to do is you want to become the dumbest person in the company, not because you become stupid over time, but because you hire people who are infinitely better than you in every way. So my goal as CEO is to find those people and to make sure that they're every bit as motivated as I would be if I were in their role. And so I think the vision is everything. If you can't sell somebody on the vision, then what's the point? I view people as falling into one of three buckets. Generally speaking, you have people who are trying to find a job. They're just trying to pay off the bills. You have people who are trying to find a career. They're trying to pay off the bills now and bigger bills tomorrow because they're going to get a nicer car and a nicer house. And then you have people who have a calling, and they would show up to work without getting paid. They'll stay up until 4:00 in the morning to get that thing done, because they know it matters to the company. And even if no one ever finds out that they stayed up that late, they'll still do it because they're not looking for recognition. They're not looking for extra pay. What they're looking for is success. They want the company to succeed because it's part of their mission too. That's what excites me. That's what motivates me about these people. And so to answer your question, simply, vision is the most important part of the recruiting process and the most important thing to share with the team. And COVID makes that hard, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to be next to somebody in person for them to get it. It would be easier if you could, but it's not necessary.
If I didn't just get this mic, it's literally the first podcast I record, and I didn't spend like $350 Canadian on it, I'd take it out and drop it on the floor because everything you just said was pure and utter gold. I love it. It's so refreshing for me to sit here and talk to a CEO and hear the way you talk, because here at Moving Forward Leadership, my tagline is lead, don't boss. And you're one of those people who get it. You get that you don't need to be the smartest guy in the room. In fact, you shouldn't be as the leader. What you should be is the one that takes in all the advice and ultimately has the responsibility of making the decision on where you're going to go. But that gets infinitely easier with a great team who has bought into the calling, the vision of the organization, and how you're leading it. And they will come forward with everything, and they'll do whatever they can for the success of the organization, which is even beyond bigger than them and you, but the organization itself. Because I focus on 3 domains of leadership here, and that is leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. And that's what I'm talking about, the last one, right? Leading your organization. But if you don't lead yourself, you don't lead your team, you're not going to lead your organization. It's kind of, stacks on top of each other. And at the end of the day, you are going to leave your organization at some point. It's going to happen. It's a matter of you decide you retire at some point, or unfortunately, like you go back to the beginning of your co-founder who sadly passed away, right? At some point, we all leave our organizations. But do you want to spend all this time, energy, money to say, okay, I'm leaving and I'm going to take everything with me? Hell no. You want to be able to leave that legacy and leave something beyond you, and that's what you've built there now at Physna. It's so apparent, and everything that you said in that little last run that you get going. And by the way, you probably do the longest replies that I've had on the show. Just saying, not that it's a bad thing at all, because it's amazing. Everything you've said is pure gold. But my point is that you've got it down path, and you're truly doing what my calling here at Moving Forward Leadership is help people who have not had the opportunity to work for someone like yourself, but unfortunately have seen the example of what not to do, and they're like, I don't know what to do. I see this person over here, and yeah, those are examples of what not to do, but how do I actually be a leader and not be a boss? And that's why we're here at Moving Forward Leadership. So it's so great. Paul, we're going to slowly start winding down, not because I don't want to keep talking to you, but I'm going to respect your time. But before I do wrap up, I got a couple last questions for you. One is a question I ask all the guests here at Moving Forward Leadership, and that is, according to you, Paul Powers, what makes a great leader?
Being a great servant. I would say that if you think of yourself as a leader, you should think of yourself as a leader in a natural sense, but you shouldn't think of yourself as a manager, a ruler, or a king type person, because if you think of yourself like that, if you get off to power, then you're a manager, right? Then it's the title that inspires you. If you're trying to do something bigger than yourself, if the mission inspires you, you won't care about the title, you won't care about the position, the authority. You won't get off to that. I certainly don't. I'm not afraid of it. I think I'm a very natural leader, but I don't lead because it feels good to lead. I lead because I have a clear vision. I know what I want to do, and I can get other people to follow me there. And the best way to do that is to lead by example. And I think servant-based leadership is a great thing. I never ask people to do something I wouldn't do myself, and I think that that's an important trait.
If I took 3 seconds to think about what your response would be, I would have come up with servant leadership for sure.
The problem that I have is that I never say one word when 20 will do. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, being Army, I kind of get told to sum up pretty quick, right?
Yeah. So do I, but it won't sink in. Yeah.
Oh, you don't have a 2-star general telling you to sum up. A little bit
Not
different.
Quite, no.
A little bit different. But seriously though, if anyone who did not see that coming after listening to this, I would say probably 45-minute interview now, did not see that coming, you should go back and re-listen, because that's what comes out of you is that servant leadership. And if I could sum it up, I would say, on a tangent point, I would say it's basically leaving your ego at the door, right?
Yeah,
As leaders, you have to leave your ego at the door for a bazillion reasons that you've eloquently said throughout this interview. The final thing is, feel free to give yourself a shameless plug. Where can people find you? How can they follow you? Talk about, where can they find the company? I know it's been in the news lately as well, so feel free to share some recent successes too.
Yeah, there's a lot out in the news now, so I won't harp on it too terribly much. But if you're interested in what we're doing, you can look us up on online. It's Physna, PHYSNA, short for physical DNA. So PHYSNA. If you look it up, you'll find all kinds of stuff about us. Thanks is Physna. It's a free thing. So if you're interested in getting a little glimpse into kind of what we do, and you're not an enterprise user, feel free to just go to thanks.com and play with it. It's free, totally free. So, and I'm obviously available via LinkedIn for anyone who's interested in chatting. You can look me up, Paul Powers and Physna, and you'll see me.
Awesome. For you, the audience, it's easy as always. Go to movingforwardleadership.com/134, and all the links there are in show notes. And before I fully wrap this up, I do something very rarely, once a blue moon, and that is I'll take the raw video and I'll dump it into the Facebook group, which I have, which is called Leadership Skills for Leaders for managers who want to be bosses, or who want to be leaders, not bosses. Ugh, I can't talk tonight, apparently. And I'm going to do that with this episode because it's been so good. And like, you're going into some high company. The first time I've ever done this was with Mark Devine, former Navy SEAL commander, and a couple other people. So for the listener, if you're not part of the Facebook group, you might want to do that, because I do things like this kind of crazy off the wall once a blue moon. And the people in the group already know that it's coming, because I said it is coming halfway through this interview. So if you want to check that out, feel free to go to movingforwardleadership.com/group, and you'll jump right in. And Paul, I even extend invitations to the group, to the guests, the former guests, so that you can interact with the listeners. So if that's something you're interested in, we'll talk offline about that too.
Wonderful. Thank you.
But seriously, man, thanks for coming out. Thanks for talking to me, but most importantly, the audience out there.
Thank you so much.
All right, that's all I got for you fine folks today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And most importantly, I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, remember, R squared, S squared, right? Rate and review the show so that it gets a little bit noticed, a bit more. But most importantly, I can help more people, because that's what I'm here for. That's what my guests are here for, is to help more people become better leaders and not being bosses, right? So remember that. R squared, rate and review. S, share the show. Share this show with someone who you think can relate to the podcast as a whole and today's topic. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And you can do that via your podcast playing app of choice through movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.